Hey everyone, Vince Nero here, Senior Content Marketing Manager with Siege Media, and today I'm going to talk to you about a staple in the content marketing world, and that is the infographic. We're going to talk about why they get a bad name and what you can do to create a good one. All right, so let's jump in. I think infographics still work. Infographics have a special place in my heart because that was one of the first things I ever created when I was freelancing before I even started working with Siege Media. So, yeah, they're really effective, but like I said, they do have a bad name. So, let's get into a little bit of why it is they have a bad name. And I think one of the biggest parts of this is that they're just overdone. It's kind of obvious, it's gotten to a point now sometimes where we know of journalists who have put on filters, or if they're getting pitched the word infographic, it'll go right to their spam folder. So, that's one kind of, it does have that negative connotation across the industry, but there are some things that you could do to get around that. So, another bad thing I think is just this bad practice that's out there, and there are these self-submit infographic sites. I'm sure you've seen them. I'll list a couple, show some examples. But basically, the thought behind that is if everybody can submit to these and post an infographic, it's less valuable to you. It's less valuable as a link, and I think it devalues the infographic on its own. Not all of them, not all those sites, are not valuable, but at scale, it's a tough thing to really draw value out of, and it's a tough thing to show a client value out of. So the next one is the poorly designed infographic, and it's one of those things that you know it when you see it, and there's even a whole Tumblr devoted to bad infographics. I thought was pretty funny. I'll put the link there. Porting just written text right into an infographic, no images, that doesn't really mean it's an infographic. So let's get that out of the way right now. Stock images, stock icons. People are getting smart enough to realize and recognize these things, and they're gonna feel fake. So it makes sense to put the effort, put the time, put your resources financially into hiring a great designer that is going to create something that is going to be, really effective. So the next one here is just the idea of getting an image only link. So basically, an image without anchor text, or a link without anchor text, isn't going to drive as much value from SEO, obviously. So what would happen is people will just get a link to their infographic, like a .jpeg link, and obviously you don't get the benefit of the anchor text, so no SEO there. So it's not going to be as valuable. Another important thing to think about here is if the images, the infographics that you're creating are off-brand. And so to dig in a little bit more to that, and really when you're creating something, you want to create something that fits in your industry. You shouldn't be just pulling information randomly to try to make it fit into your website. It should have some connection to what you're working on, what product you're selling. And the last thing I think that really, really hurts infographics and gives them a bad name is the idea that people are just bad at pitching them. We've all gotten these terrible pitches, but I can do an entire video on how to pitch infographics. If you want that, please let me know in the comments. But the idea here is just you want to make sure you're pitching to the right audience. You want to make sure they're open to infographics, and I'll get a little bit into that here. So let's kind of flip it and think about what infographics are actually good for. So obviously getting links, getting shares, getting brand mentions. Well, when you create these infographics, you always want to tie a goal to them, right? So the idea there is you want to create something that is shareable on a post that is purely search driven, where you want to just basically lowering the barrier of entry to enable someone to share it, to give them something useful, listing out a bunch of ways, like the best content marketing tools or something like that. Find something that's really useful in that post and create an infographic about it. Maybe it's the best ways to use those tools, or tips or hacks or something to use those tools. You're basically just giving something that is like an ancillary product to your search driven post, where your search driven post on its own isn't something that you can pitch to get links. But by creating this infographic that ties into that topic, you can kind of create a shareable and create something that is going to get you a link. That gets to the last point here, and that's the idea that sometimes when we refer to infographics, we think of them not as an infographic, but as a shareable asset. That's kind of a little terminology that we use here at Siege because essentially what you're doing, like I said, is lowering the barrier entry for a user, and you just want them to be able to have something that they can put on their blog, that they can put it on their site, and then link back to your piece. Okay, so when should you use infographics? I'm going to give you 3 quick questions, and basically I've covered all these, but first one is, does your audience actually want an infographic? So like I said, some audiences are super open to infographics. They like shareables, whereas others, they create their own info or their own shareables, their own images, or they might not even want images at all. It might be, like I said, those resource pages, like senior citizens and veterans, like they don't want infographics. Sometimes you can create them just to have it, but if you're on a budget, um, they don't need them. So the other thing is, does it belong on your site? So I said this in the beginning, but topically, is this something that you should be writing about? Does it tie back to your product, to your business? You can tell if you're getting links from places where your audience is not, spending their time on. And lastly, are you providing something that's really, really useful? And this might seem like a really obvious question, but at the end of the day, the easiest thing to do is just ask yourself, if I was pitched this, would I share it? Is this really something that I'm interested in? I'm going to make use of. So let's get a little bit into these share triggers and what you can do to create an effective infographic. So first one is going to be to simplify a complex topic. And here's an example from Save on Energy, and this is how wind turbines work. Kind of complex topic, but what they did was created a animated infographic that shows you all the different parts, and this was really effective for conveying this complex idea of what wind turbines are. Visualizing data and survey results, I think, is a really effective tactic for creating infographics and getting links and making your surveys and data pieces really shareable. So here's an example from EBI. They asked employees how they feel about their jobs. You can see it's really well laid out. Each section has their own different color, and you can kind of understand it starts really broad and it gets really specific to the data that you're conveying. The next one is to impress them with an art style or your artwork. And here's an example where it's Halloween treats. It's this kind of pseudo photography piece, but also has some graphical elements that are merged together, and they mesh really well. And I think it just levels up this piece and makes it more shareable. And notice how this style actually matches the outreach market. All right, the next thing is you want to create something that's really, really useful. And I've kind of mentioned this before, but essentially you want to create something that is going to give someone an actionable takeaway, something that they can do right away. This example I'm showing here is basically a Google Hacks, and it's just basic, and it tells you, different actionable hacks and things that you can do to make your life easier when using Google Docs. Last one here is to recap your post. Now, this might seem obvious, and there is a little bit of nuance to how you can do this, but basically this piece that I'm showing here is something I did on a piece about us pages, where we essentially created a whole page about how to create an About Us page and examples of other people that have done it well. And what I did was created this infographic to make a shareable asset. Again, I'm taking a kind of search-driven post and creating a shareable that I can then pitch to get links back to it. But this is recapping the findings of the post. And I'm basically recapping what it is that makes an About Us page great. So there are some examples and some science-backed tips for doing so. One more I want to touch on is this idea of like the complete list. And I know you've seen these posts before, but in some cases they do work well as infographics. Here's one. Has a very heavy visual style. Conveying this information visually obviously is really important, but it's every car from Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. It's got a little pop culture slant to it, so this was really successful, and I love the art style here. So let's really briefly recap when infographics don't work. And that is, again, the bad pitches. If you're not pitching it correctly, and or if you're pitching it to the wrong people, you're not going to be successful with an infographic. Now, another one is if the industry itself is saturated with infographics, it's going to be tough. If you're trying to hit a topic that's been overdone, one of the ways you can actually see this is if you're searching Google and you just tell on the search results, if you see roundups of that specific infographic, this example here is pet food infographic, you'll see that there's some roundups on there of every single pet food infographic that's out there. So that tells me, okay, this is kind of saturated. It's been overdone to the point where people are making roundups of other infographics. So hopefully that helps kind of demystify and it helps you understand how to do this effectively. If you like what you see, please give it a thumbs up. Let me know what you think in the comments. Like I said, if there's a couple videos in there, hit me in the comments and we'll create them. So thanks for watching.